What is up, y'all? We're going to be talking about classical theism and how this God is incoherent. So yeah, I feel like most arguments when we talk about God, they're going to bring up problem of evil, hiddenness, and these arguments are talking about evidence. Or we might say, does the world look like it was made by God? But there's a different kind of argument. One doesn't need evidence at all. And that's what I'm going to be showing you today. It simply asks, before we even get to evidence, does this thing you're describing make sense? Can a being with these attributes even exist? And when you press on that for the God of classical theism or the God of Aquinas, you find the contradiction buried right in the center of it all. So let's get into it. It's popular on TikTok. It's this whole syllogism where it's like, creation is a change, a timeless God can't change, therefore he can't create. But this reply, there is a reply to it, that God does not go from creating to not creating or not creating to creating. It is just this flow. His creative act is eternal and unchanging. What's changing is the universe. God isn't actually himself changing. But there's a trick. You can grant it. You grant a timeless creation as a premise, and then you then show it doesn't help them. You need something deeper. And this is the whole dilemma I'm going to be talking about today, is that it's called causistence, and it's not my own. It's a principle that's been talked about through philosophy forever. The basic idea is that to exist concretely is to stand in causal relations. If something has zero causal impact on anything and nothing has any causal impact back on it, then it doesn't exist. Think about it this way. Someone says, there's a particle in this room behind me, and I then ask them, what does it do? Does it affect light, gravity, fields, instruments? I say, can you detect it ever? You've just described a word. A thing with no causal power isn't something that's hidden. It's nothing. That's the whole point. I mean, I feel like it's pretty obvious to understand that. A particle that does nothing, interacts with nothing, is not a particle. We are just giving it a word, a label. So you can view this as the word God. It has no importance. We're not really describing anything. That's the whole problem. So there's only two options, right? Now we're going to talk about causistence and go to classical theism. Here's the premise breakdown. P1, causistence is to exist concretely, to stand in a genuine causal relation. We've been over this. P2, classical theism's God is timeless, immutable, uncaused, an uncaused creator. Premise 3, if he created, he stands in a causal relation to the universe. Now here's the fork. Either that relation is a genuine causation or it isn't. It's exhaustive. And both answers are not going to help you. Let me show you. God's creative relation to the universe is going to be this genuine causation. I mean, that's the most rational thought. But then what feature of God specifically accounts for the universe existing rather than the universe not existing? As I brought up before with the whole particle analogy, for any genuine cause, you should be able to point to something about the cause that explains the effect it brought about. But this isn't like I'm demanding a high bar. This is the criteria we use for everything else in the universe. At least I do, to know what exists. And this immutability from God destroys arm A, because an immutable God has identical properties in every possible state. His properties in the world where the universe exists are exactly the same as in any world where nothing exists. Same God, either way. That's the dilemma of arm A. Scenario B. God exists and wills no universe. Now tell me what's different about God between these two. There's nothing. God is immutable. The cause looks identical in both. So pointing to a God doesn't explain why A exists rather than B. There is still a gap. You just put God's name in front of this gap. It has no explanation and no substance that we can use. Let's look at what a sophisticated theist or mostly a Thomist would say. They say God's immutable essence specifically and necessarily accounts for this particular universe. It's not that God is genuinely, generically there. His nature is just the kind of nature that produces the creation that we're trying to talk about. And that would give you a property of God that specifically accounts for scenario A rather than scenario B. And this sounds good. It honestly does. But it doesn't close the hole. So watch what happens. Now, this is the problem, and this is where classical theism is just going to lose. If God's essence necessarily entails this specific universe, then this universe follows necessarily from God's necessary nature. But classical theism says God's creation was a free act. God could have not created. The whole point is that God chose this. So horn 1 would still be, if the essence does not specifically account for this universe, we still have arm A, that it would just loop back to there. But horn 2, if it does necessarily account for it, then this universe is as necessary as God himself. That is then a modal collapse. I can explain that in another video or in the comments. There is no middle position. Either this creative act doesn't account for this universe and it's empty, or it necessarily accounts for it and God has no freedom. Classical theism loses either way. Now, arm 2 is much easier. Say you accept God's relation to the universe is not some genuine causation. Then God stands in no genuine causal relation to anything at all, to anything contingent. So causistance comes back around, as I said earlier, a being with no causal relation to anything concrete, to another concrete entity, does not concretely exist. It is this abstract placeholder. Placeholders don't know things. They don't love things. They don't judge things. They don't create universes. It can't do a single thing classical theism needs God to do. So either God causally creates, and arm A shows that that's incoherent given his immutability, or he doesn't. And arm B then shows he doesn't concretely exist. Both arms work, and there's no gap you can get from this with classical theism. So just as a quick refresher, so we're all on the same page of what causistance is trying to explain, you cannot be outside of causation and inside it at the same time. This is not transcendence. Now let's give the honest frontier, because I always give you at least one. This argument is targeted. Open theism, where God is temporal and changes with creation, gets out of arm A because a changing God can have a causal profile that differs between creating and not creating. Or a deist, whose God genuinely interacted with the world at creation even once, has a God with a causal purchase on reality. There's at least one relation. That's what we're looking for. Pantheism, where God is genuinely embedded in the world, escapes in its own way too. All these views have serious problems of their own, and they look nothing like God of any major religion. But the argument I'm trying to present, as the title says, is a scalpel. It's not a hammer. It's trying to cut classical theism specifically. I'm doing classical theism first. So, in the end, immutable, timeless, uncaused, and creator. The first three place God outside of our causal reality. And then the fourth one, of him being a creator, requires causal contact with the reality. 3 of these 4 words disqualify the fourth. We do not find God unlikely,